Today, CENTCOM's priorities are to deter Iran, counter violent extremist organizations, and compete strategically with China and Russia. That is what we do.
United States Central Command CENTCOM Warsaw TOMCOM is one of the 11 unified combatant commands of the U.S. Department of Defense. It was established in 1983.
China, dependent on the region for over half of its imported crude oil and more than a third of all its natural gas, is also moving beyond energy-based investments to encompass physical and telecommunications infrastructure that advances its Belt and Road initiatives. 19 of 21 CENTCOM countries have signed a Belt and Road agreement with China.
That sounds important.
Additional forces. And to accomplish these strategic priorities, CENTCOM focuses on a strategic approach centered on people, partners, and innovation. People are our greatest asset and our most critical resource. Our partners are the nation's comparative advantage against competitors like China and Russia. And across CENTCOM, we cultivate deep, abiding partnerships that can serve as a hedge against threats in the region. Innovation of thought, innovation of process, innovation of concept, and technology extends the value of our partnerships, and innovation allows us to move faster, operate more efficiently, and increase progress across all operational efforts. So, people, partners, and innovation, that is how we do them. In closing, let me thank you again for the support of our service members, civilians, and their families.
We campaign with our allies and partners to advance mutual interests and promote stability and prosperity on the African continent. You should be proud of their efforts. I know I certainly am. Africa is a vast and dynamic continent of sovereign nations. Collectively and individually, these nations are increasingly important players on the global stage. And as such, AFRICOM's contribution to American security must be viewed through a global lens. Threats once contained on the continent are transforming into worldwide threats. Terrorism, poverty, food insecurity, climate change, and mass migration shatter African lives. They sow the seeds of violent extremists and Russian exploitation. The Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine has aggravated the food insecurity crisis in Africa by blocking vital food shipments to the same nations that feel the deepest impacts of climate change. Russia's Wagner mercenaries turn chaos into cash and destabilize entire regions across the African continent, and it cuts at American interests worldwide. The expansion of Middle East-based violent extremist groups such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda, including the biggest franchise of Al-Shabaab, threatens American lives. Solutions to these colossal problems must be a shared burden. African nations need to be at the helm of the concerted international efforts to produce sustainable outcomes. Assisting African nations in achieving their goals while advancing American interests can only be accomplished through a synchronized whole-of-government strategy. We call it the 3D approach, which is the toolkit of diplomacy, development, and defense. But one tool does not succeed without the whole kit. So I will advocate for State Department and USAID partners to receive the resources they need to succeed.
After the introduction, the Congress members asked some questions.
I'm interested, General Kurilla, one of my frustrations about the way we left Afghanistan was we did not maintain a base anywhere in Afghanistan from which we could conduct ISR.
Intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance.
Afghanistan, but we are working with some alternative airborne ISR, like I said, high duration stuff that can stay up for days, and we're working towards programs and platforms that can stay up for weeks.
Great.
Well, and what I would strongly suggest is that we need to make that case, and we need to make it better. I think there's a tendency, at least in the pronouncements that I hear, just like, we're the U.S., we're good, they're China, they're bad, therefore you have to agree with us. I can assure you, and everyone at this table, the rest of the world doesn't look at it that way. They look at a mixed record coming from us. They look at their needs. I think we are right. I think our role in the world is incredibly important. I think the alliance that we put together and the idea of a rules-based international order is vastly better than China's debt traps and China's desire to come in and extract resources, China's autocratic approach. Crucially, you know, if you say anything, I mean, literally anything that China doesn't like, they'll cut you off at the knees, okay? That's the argument we need to be making. I mean, South Africa is out there doing joint exercises with Russia and China, and we're going, don't do that. We need a better argument. It's really crucial that we do that. Just in the last couple of minutes, on my question I raised in the first place.
And lastly, General Kurilla, there are numerous efforts underway in Congress this year to enhance U.S. and Israeli collaboration on future warfare technologies. I have a lengthy amendment in the NDAA on this, for instance. This would include working together on directed energy, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, missile defense, space, and other cutting-edge programs. Do you support efforts to provide Israel with additional capabilities to ensure that it can effectively respond to enhanced Iranian threats that we've been already talking about?
Thank you, Congressman. We are committed to the defense of Israel. We work very, very closely with them and a lot of their new technologies. I have been to the country multiple times and looked at everything from their ballistic missile defense, their counter-UAS, and a lot of their advanced technologies like their Iron Beam that they are coming out with. And we also are coming out with our own directed energy systems as well.
Excellent. And Dr. Wallander, anything to add to that?
You know, the United States has an ironclad commitment to the defense of Israel and manifested most recently in the extraordinarily successful Exercise Juniper Oak, which exercised and demonstrated the level of interoperability and capability and the ability of the United States, CENTCOM in particular, to surge that capability and work closely with Israel to exercise and also demonstrate that capability.
Very good. Thank you all for being here. I now recognize
China's approach is again using its sort of economic muscle to again, and I think it was described. I mean, it's a bait and switch, you know, type of plan. But 5 days ago, there was an incident in the Central African Republic where 9 Chinese nationals were gunned down in broad daylight at a gold mine. Again, the initial claim by the government was that it was rebel forces that were responsible for that mass shooting. Last night, there was actually reporting that eyewitnesses described that the perpetrators were actually Wagner Group, which is kind of an interesting colliding autocracies playing itself out in that continent. Xi Jinping actually stopped and interrupted the summit he had a few days ago with Putin to condemn this shooting and you know, promised that there would be a full investigation to get to the bottom of it. But again, it was kind of a, you know, it's hard to get your head around the way that, you know, again, these two exploitative autocracies are now basically almost like scorpions in a bottle, where their approach to this part of the world is now even possibly creating, you know, conflict amongst themselves. So, you know, Dr. Wallander, I don't know if you want to comment on that, you know, that actually, going back to Mr. Smith's comments, is maybe an opportunity for us to really show that, you know, neither one of these players are really going to create stability or prosperity in this part of the world, and there's a better way to proceed. Or reimbursed or compensated by gold, diamonds, other materials and minerals that obviously are valuable.
Congressman, absolutely. Wagner has ill intentions. They're destabilizing activity. They have a history of it on the continent. And then, as we can see in the Central African Republic, and there are no good stories in their entrenchment in Libya as well, and now Mali. I am concerned about that. That's a layered threat that we're really concerned that they are the vanguard of the Russian Federation, because they have a thinly veiled false value proposition that says we're going to provide security for you, especially nations that have been affected by a coup. That's what happened in Mali. And then they come up their invoice. and where's only security they actually provide is the bubble around the elite or those that were that initiated the coup in the first place. And there's also a roadmap to rare earth minerals or diamonds or gold. There's Vinnie Boghossian is all about power for profit. What we're doing, Congressman, is initiating a campaign plan with our OAIs across the whole government approach to suppress this.
Particularly in West Africa, in the evidence that Wagner brings not security and stability for their countries, but in fact is an entry point for economic exploitation, for instability, actually extraordinary and horrifying assaults on civilians in these countries, because what Wagner offers is regime security, not national security to these countries. I would say on this China-Russia issue, that is an interesting incident, and we'll have to track it more closely. I am more struck by the consonance and the alignment of strategic interests at the level of Xi and Putin, and that's the real challenge we have going forward, that they share an interest in undermining global security and the rules-based international order and use one another to advance their national goals, but often those goals are very complementary.
On the African continent, it's a layered risk. It's a layered threat. So my first and immediate, as I engage with our partners, because it is going to be partner-led, U.S.-enabled, it is violent extremist organizations, and how do we address that? So that segues into how we address that through our programs, our portfolios of security force assistance. As we look at 333, Title 10, to train and equip or build institutional capacity in 332, that's what we need to address this. But we do have a pacing threat, and we do have that immediate threat as well. And that's where it's going to be a whole of government approach, collectively, all the OAIs coming together and putting together a value proposition to our African partners to deter them becoming the partner of choice.
Very good. Thank you. You said an underinvestment in African security raises the risk of an unexpected crisis that would abruptly strip U.S. resources away from our top national security challenges in that arena of great power competition. Gentlemen, in your professional military judgment, do you assess that the shift in great power competition and resources and focus by the United States increases the risk of a black swan event? And do you believe, though, that our military building capability to address great power competition in any way would deter a black swan event? And thirdly, do you believe that efforts by either Russia or China are adding to the potential of any actors out there that may be interested in perpetrating a black swan event?